The Great Pyramid stood as the tallest structure on Earth for almost 4,000 years. How did ancient societies without cranes or computers build monuments of such impossible scale? This video assembles 25 archaeological clues to reveal the complete system behind these wonders, showing you the true blueprint of ancient ambition. We will see how a society's choice of a single stone could dictate the fate of an empire, and why a simple splash of water might have been their greatest innovation. By the end, you will understand the integrated machine of geology, logistics, and human spirit that turned mountain into monument. What does our drive to build the impossible truly say about us? That first decision was perhaps the most important one they ever made. Before a single stone was cut, before any foundation was laid, ancient master builders would embark on a quest. They were not just architects, they were detectives of the earth, reading the landscape for clues written in stone. Their monumental projects did not begin with blueprints, but with a geological survey. They needed to find the right raw material, and that search could take them hundreds of miles from the construction site itself. Take the Great Pyramid. Its brilliant white exterior, long since stripped away, was once made from a specific, fine-grained limestone quarried at Tura, on the opposite side of the Nile River. This stone was chosen for its ability to be cut smoothly and polished to a sheen that would gleam under the desert sun. But for the immense weight-bearing chambers inside, they needed something much stronger. So they turned south to the distant quarries at Aswan to harvest granite, a rock so hard it could support millions of tons of masonry for millennia. This was not a random choice. It was a calculated selection based on an intimate understanding of material properties, hardness, grain, and how each stone would weather over centuries. They knew that the wrong stone in the wrong place meant collapse or, at best, a monument that would crumble within a generation. So this first clue reveals a foundational truth. The project always started with a deep, almost spiritual connection to the land. By choosing materials perfectly suited to their purpose and environment, they were laying a hidden foundation of knowledge, one that guaranteed their work would endure long after they were gone. This geological wisdom was the silent partner in every ancient wonder, the unshakable bedrock upon which all ambition was built. But finding the stone was only half the battle. The real challenge was convincing a mountain to let go. How do you persuade a solid block of granite, weighing as much as 1,000 elephants, to simply leave the earth? At places like the unfinished obelisk in Aswan, Egypt, the answer is literally carved into the landscape, a ghostly blueprint of ancient industry. This colossal monument, still partly attached to the bedrock, is our second clue, a time capsule showing the quarrying process frozen in its tracks. Around its immense form, you can see deep, narrow trenches carved by hand. Workers would stand in these trenches, swinging dolerite balls, a stone harder than granite, to patiently pulverize the rock along a perfectly straight line. It was a method of subtraction, of removing everything that was not the obelisk, grain by grain, over months or even years. This reveals a mindset completely foreign to our age of instant results, a strategy built on controlled force and monumental patience. They understood that brute strength alone would shatter their prize, so they applied a persistent, rhythmic force, a constant tapping that eventually won the argument with the stone itself. Another ingenious clue comes from the presence of simple wooden wedges. Workers would carve narrow slots along a natural fracture line, hammer in dry wooden wedges, and then soak them with water. As the wood expanded with tremendous, inexorable pressure, it would cleanly split the granite along the intended seam. It was physics as a precision tool. So these quarries were not just holes in the ground, they were the first assembly lines where raw geology was transformed into standardized units of ambition. Every block that left that quarry was already a testament to a society that could think in centuries, that could invest thousands of days of labor into a single act of extraction, believing completely in a future they would never see. Once the stone was free, the true test of logistics began. A block of granite is not a feather, it is a mountain's fragment, a dense mass that defies easy movement. The third clue to unlocking ancient construction lies not in the quarry or the building site, but in the agonizing space between them, a puzzle of physics and sheer human ingenuity. How do you move a 200-ton obelisk across miles of desert without wheels or engines? The answer was found painted on a tomb wall, a detailed instruction manual from the past. It shows a colossal statue being pulled by a team of workers, but it is not resting on rollers or wheels. It is strapped securely to a massive wooden sledge. This was their heavy-duty transport vehicle, a simple platform that distributed the immense weight across a broad surface. For decades, archaeologists assumed this was the full story, a testament to raw manpower. But experiments told a different, more frustrating tale. When researchers tried to replicate this method by dragging a replica sledge across dry desert sand, they hit a wall of physics. The friction was overwhelming. The leading edge of the sledge would simply plow into a growing berm of sand, requiring a force equal to hundreds of men for even a modest block. It seemed mathematically impossible for the sizes we know they moved. Then, a sharp-eyed researcher looked back at that ancient painting and noticed a tiny, almost overlooked detail. Ahead of the sledge, a worker is depicted pouring a liquid from a vessel onto the sand directly in its path. This was the breakthrough. It was not a ceremonial act, it was applied physics. Subsequent experiments proved that wetting the sand just the right amount creates a perfect paradox. The sand grains bind together with capillary action, forming a firm, smooth surface for the sledge to glide across. The liquid eliminates the berm, reducing the pulling force required by as much as half. What seemed like an impossible feat of brute strength was, in reality, a masterclass in friction management. They turned the desert itself into a lubricated track. This simple, elegant solution reveals a mindset that saw the environment not as an obstacle, but as a tool to be shaped and understood. It showcases an innovation born from observation, where a splash of water became the secret ingredient that transformed an immovable object into a monument on the march. That splash of water on the sand was a preview of a far grander hydraulic strategy. While they mastered friction on land, ancient engineers understood that the ultimate solution to moving mountains was to make them float. The fourth clue in our investigation lies in the silent, forgotten waterways that once snaked through the desert and jungle. For societies blessed with rivers or coastlines, water was not just for drinking or farming. It was the original superhighway, a liquid road that could bear impossible loads. The archaeological proof is etched into the landscape itself. At the base of the Giza Plateau, sediment cores and geological surveys have revealed the ghostly imprint of a harbor, a vast man-made basin connected to the Nile by a sophisticated canal system. This was not a scenic dock, it was a bustling industrial port. The brilliant white limestone from Tura, the red granite from Aswan, these stones did not march across the desert, they sailed. Heavy barges, likely built from local timber and lashed together for stability, would be loaded at the quarry docks. Once afloat, the physics changed completely. The crushing weight that would stall 1,000 men on a sledge was effortlessly supported by buoyancy. A single barge, pulled by a team of rowers or guided by the current and sail, could carry dozens of multi-ton blocks in one trip. This canal network transformed the Nile from a river into a conveyor belt, a logistical miracle that centralized materials from hundreds of miles away directly to the foot of the rising pyramid. This genius was not unique to Egypt. Half a world away, in the jungles of Cambodia, researchers mapping the area around Angkor Wat discovered an intricate spiderweb of canals. These waterways connected distant sandstone quarries at Mount Kulin directly to the temple site. The stones, cut and shaped at the mountain, were floated down river on a journey of over 35 kilometers. Without this aquatic network, the construction of Angkor Wat, with its 5 million tons of sandstone, becomes an unimaginable puzzle. The use of waterways reveals a profound understanding of energy economics. Why fight gravity and friction across rugged terrain when the water will do the work for you? It minimized human energy expenditure to a staggering degree, allowing a society to concentrate its labor force on the actual act of construction rather than exhausting it on transport. Mastering hydrology, the science of water, was therefore just as critical as mastering architecture. It proves these societies were not just builders of monuments, but builders of infrastructure, seeing the entire region as an interconnected machine where river, canal, and quarry were all parts of a single grand design. The stone itself was only the raw material. The true innovation was the liquid road that carried it home. The water road delivered the stone, but then came the vertical challenge, a problem of gravity itself. With the massive blocks now at the base of a rising mountain of masonry, how did ancient builders lift them, story by story, into the sky? The fifth clue lies in the most debated and misunderstood tool of all, the humble ramp. For decades, popular imagination pictured a single, colossal straight ramp stretching into the desert. A slope of such immense scale, it would have required more material than the pyramid itself. Archaeology, however, paints a far more sophisticated picture. At the Sphinx Temple near Giza and at other sites, we find the physical remnants of construction ramps, compacted layers of mud brick, gypsum, and rubble. These were not temporary dirt piles, they were engineered structures built with the same careful planning as the monument they served. The debate among scholars centers on the form these ramps took as the pyramid grew. A straight ramp, effective for the lower levels, becomes impossibly long and voluminous as height increases. So, the evidence suggests a system that evolved. A zigzagging ramp, ascending one face of the pyramid then turning to ascend the next, would require less material while providing a continuous path. Some erosion patterns on pyramid faces even hint at the possibility of spiraling ramps that hug the structure's sides, a corkscrew of industry winding its way to the apex. Each design was a calculated compromise between the angle of incline, the stability of the ramp itself, and the sheer physical space available at the construction site. The angle was everything: too steep, and the workers could not pull the load; too shallow, and the ramp became a logistical nightmare. These inclined planes transformed an impossible vertical lift into a manageable, sustained horizontal pull. Teams of workers, likely using ropes and sledges, could walk a block up the gradual slope, their collective muscle amplified by the simple mechanics of the plane. This was the primary mechanical advantage, a tool that turned human endurance into architectural altitude. The ramp was the temporary spine of the entire operation, a sacrificial structure of mud and brick that was built up with the pyramid and later carefully dismantled, leaving only subtle traces in the geology for us to find. It represents a profound understanding of physics and resource management, proving that the true genius of these projects often lay in the temporary, forgotten infrastructure that made the permanent wonder possible. The ramp solved the problem of height, but it could not solve the problem of precision. A block delivered to its tier was still just a heavy, inert mass. The final, delicate act of construction, the subtle nudge to seat a cornerstone or the careful tilt to slide a lintel into place, required a different kind of genius. Our sixth clue is one of physics made simple: the invisible hand of the lever. While ramps leave scars on the landscape, the lever leaves almost no trace at all, its evidence found in necessity and in the silent testimony of materials left behind. At many monumental sites, archaeologists have uncovered caches of exceptionally strong timber, often imported from great distances alongside coils of thick plant fiber rope. These were not for building fires or tying bundles. They were the components of a precision toolkit. Imagine a massive stone block resting on its sledge. A team could insert a stout wooden beam beneath one edge, using a smaller stone as a fulcrum. By pulling down on the long end of the beam, they could lift the far heavier end of the block just enough to slip rollers underneath or adjust its alignment. This is the fundamental principle of mechanical advantage, where a small force applied over a great distance moves a great weight over a small distance. But the true sophistication may have come from combining this with the concept of the counterweight, a container filled with sand or smaller stones attached by rope to the block could act as a controllable lifting force. By slowly releasing sand from the container, workers could lower a multi-ton architrave into its exact position with a gentle, controlled descent that brute force could never achieve. This technique transforms the chaotic energy of 100 straining men into a smooth, manageable force. Later textual references from cultures like ancient Greece describe such methods in detail, suggesting a widespread, inherited knowledge of practical mechanics. So while we may not find a 4,000-year-old lever still in place, we find the capacity for it in the strategic stockpiling of timber and rope, and we see its logical necessity in the millimeter-perfect joints of megalithic walls. This clue reveals that ancient engineers thought in terms of forces, balance, and control. They understood that the final act of construction was not about overwhelming power, but about applying the minimum necessary force with maximum intelligence. It was the difference between pushing a boulder and turning a key, a shift from monumental effort to elegant, final execution. Yet that final, elegant execution left behind a signature, a fingerprint of the hands that shaped the stone. The seventh clue is written not in scrolls or paintings, but in the stone itself, in the breathtaking precision of a seam so tight you cannot slide a piece of paper between two blocks. This is the evidence of the finished work, a silent testament to a culture of craftsmanship where perfection was not just for beauty but for survival. In places like the Inca citadel of Machu Picchu or the depths of an Egyptian granite sarcophagus, we see walls assembled without a drop of mortar. This was not a stylistic choice, it was a structural ultimatum. Without a sticky paste to fill gaps, every block had to be a perfect geometric puzzle piece, shaped to interlock with its neighbors with such intimacy that they became a single, monolithic entity. The force that held them together was not glue, but friction and form, a marriage of surfaces so exact it could withstand centuries of earthquakes. To achieve this, the tools and techniques had to be equally precise. Archaeologists examining unfinished blocks find fascinating clues. Small, rounded protrusions, often called knobs or bosses, were deliberately left on the sides of stones. These were not mistakes, they were handles. Workers could lash ropes around these knobs to maneuver the multi-ton block into its final position with delicate control, only chiseling them off once the fit was perfect. The tool marks tell another story. In Egypt, we see the fine, parallel striations left by copper saws. Copper is soft, so how did it cut granite? The answer is in the sand. Workers would pour abrasive quartz sand into the cut as they sawed, turning the simple copper blade into a powered grinding tool, where the hard sand grains did the actual cutting. For drilling, they used hollow reed or copper tubes, again with abrasive slurry, to core out hard stone with astonishing accuracy, and then came the final act, the polishing. Using harder stones and endless patience, they would grind the surfaces until they were flawlessly smooth, creating those famous joints that seemed to defy the very idea of separate pieces. This level of precision reveals a mindset that saw stone not as a stubborn obstacle, but as a medium to be conversed with, understood, and ultimately persuaded into perfect alignment. It was a culture that valued the anonymous artisan as much as the architect, because the stability of the entire empire literally rested on the quality of his work. In these seamless walls, we see the culmination of all that came before: the quarrying, the transport, the lifting, all leading to this moment of perfect, silent connection. That perfect seam between stones speaks to a mastery of the earthly, but the true scale of their ambition was measured against the sky. The eighth clue in our investigation is written not in rock, but in light and shadow, in the silent alignment of colossal structures with the sun, moon, and stars. From the Great Pyramid's near-perfect orientation to the cardinal directions, to Stonehenge's alignment with the solstice sunrise, this celestial precision was not mystical guesswork. It was high-precision engineering, using the cosmos as a fixed reference point. Imagine the challenge of laying out the foundation for a structure the size of a city block, ensuring its sides run true north, south, east, and west for eternity. Without a magnetic compass which would not exist for millennia, ancient surveyors turned to the one clock that never failed, the heavens. The method was elegant in its simplicity. They likely used a basic tool called a gnomon, which is just a fancy word for a vertical stake planted in level ground. By carefully marking the tip of the stake's shadow at different points throughout the day, particularly around the equinox when day and night are of equal length, they could trace a perfect east-west line. The north-south line was derived from this, creating a giant, immutable crosshair etched into the desert floor. This astronomical blueprint was the first and most critical layer of the entire project. It transformed a random patch of desert into a sacred coordinate grid, anchored not to shifting sands but to the axis of the planet itself. This celestial alignment served a profound dual purpose. On a practical level, it provided an infallible guide for the armies of workers and architects. Every wall, every corridor, every internal chamber could be measured and positioned from this cosmic baseline, ensuring geometric perfection from the foundation up. But on a cultural level, it wove the monument into the very fabric of the universe. By aligning a tomb with the circumpolar stars, as in the pyramid's so-called air shafts, or a temple with the rising sun on the longest day, the builders were creating a permanent connection between human achievement and cosmic order. The structure became a terrestrial echo of celestial patterns, a statement that this society understood its place within a grander design. This clue reveals that the master builders were also master astronomers, their eyes trained as much on the slow dance of the constellations as on the stone before them. They understood that to build something truly eternal, you must first borrow the unwavering permanence of the stars. The stars provided the grand blueprint, but to build a universe in stone, you need a common language. This ninth clue is the humble measuring stick, the silent agreement that turned chaos into order. Across the vast, dusty plain of a construction site, with thousands of workers carving stone and molding brick, how could every piece possibly fit together? The answer was standardization, a shared system of measurement so ingrained it became the project's invisible backbone. In Egypt, this standard was the royal cubit, a length of about 52.3 centimeters, meticulously preserved on carved rods of wood or stone. These were not rough guidelines, they were the law of the land, the definitive unit from which all other dimensions flowed. The proof is in the numbers. The base length of the Great Pyramid is almost exactly 365 cubits, a number echoing the days of the solar year, while its height was designed as 280 royal cubits. This was not coincidence, it was calculated harmony, but the concept traveled far beyond the Nile. In the mudbrick ziggurats of Mesopotamia, archaeologists find bricks baked to astonishingly consistent sizes, their dimensions based on local units like the Sumerian foot. This consistency was a logistical revolution. It meant a brick molded in a workshop 10 miles away would fit perfectly into a wall being laid by a team that had never seen it. It allowed for the division of labor on an unimaginable scale, with quarries producing standard-sized blocks, workshops turning out identical wooden elements, and transport crews knowing exactly what weight they were moving, all without constant supervision or adjustment. The measuring stick was the first act of large-scale management, a simple tool that created a framework of trust and predictability. It transformed construction from a chaotic art into a repeatable science, where the ambition of a pharaoh or a king could be translated into a million identical tasks, each one a small, perfect echo of the grand design. In agreeing on the length of a stick, they built the first and most critical component of any megaproject, a shared reality. That shared reality of measurement created a framework, but a framework alone cannot build a pyramid. It needs hands, thousands of them, working in concert for decades. Our 10th clue pulls back the camera from the monument itself to reveal the vibrant, bustling world at its base, the city of the builders. For years, the popular imagination painted a grim picture of endless slave labor, a narrative of hardship and coercion. But the archaeology at Giza tells a completely different story, one written in the foundations of bakeries, the remnants of breweries, and the orderly layout of dormitories. Just beyond the plateau, excavations have uncovered an entire settlement, a purpose-built city designed to house and sustain the workforce. This was not a prison camp, it was a highly organized logistical hub. We find evidence of massive, industrial-scale bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves of bread daily. Nearby, vats and installations point to large-scale brewing, providing a safe, nutritious beverage. Areas dedicated to drying and salting fish show a protein supply chain in action. The scale of this provisioning is staggering, a clear indication that feeding this army of laborers was a primary administrative task as critical as quarrying stone. The workers themselves lived in long, barrack-style dormitories, suggesting a rotating, skilled workforce, perhaps organized in crews from different regions of Egypt who would serve for a season before returning home. Medical evidence from cemeteries associated with these workers shows they received care for injuries and lived on a diet that supported heavy labor. This evidence collectively dismantles the old myth. It points to a system of organized, compensated labor, a national project that employed and fed a significant portion of the population. The pyramid, therefore, was more than a tomb, it was a socio-economic engine. For generations, it provided stable employment, food security, and a sense of shared national purpose. It transformed a barren construction site into a temporary metropolis, a city that existed for one glorious, unified goal. This clue reveals that the true miracle was not just moving stone, but moving people, organizing their lives, and sustaining their bodies with such efficiency that they could focus their collective energy on a single, skyward dream. The monument's endurance is a testament not to oppression, but to a society's ability to mobilize itself into a living, breathing machine of creation. That bustling city of builders could not function on goodwill alone. It ran on information, a constant flow of numbers, names, and orders that turned a chaotic mass of humanity into a synchronized machine. Our 11th clue is not carved in stone, but pressed into clay and inked on fragile papyrus, the administrative records of the ancient world. These are the project manager's logs, the time sheets and supply manifests that made the impossible routine. In the dust of Mesopotamian ruins, archaeologists have unearthed thousands of cuneiform tablets, many of which are not epic poems but mundane accounting. They meticulously list daily barley rations for teams of workers, the allotment of oil, and the assignment of specific tasks. A single tablet might record that a crew of 20 men from a certain village were assigned to dig a canal for 10 days, with their food calculated to the precise measure. This was not just bookkeeping, it was the nervous system of the empire, ensuring that energy, in the form of food, was delivered exactly where and when physical energy was being expended. But perhaps the most astonishing direct evidence comes from the Red Sea coast of Egypt, at a place called Wadi al-Jarf. Here, in a cavern, researchers found a trove of papyrus documents dating to the very reign of Khufu, the pharaoh of the Great Pyramid. One remarkable logbook, belonging to an inspector named Mura, details the daily activities of his team over several months. It records the transport of fine white limestone from the quarries at Tura to the pyramid site at Giza. The entries are breathtakingly normal, noting the number of trips made, the state of the canals, and even the days when work was halted for festivals or because a high official was visiting. We read about the crew eating well, receiving their regular allocations of bread and beer. This is not the voice of a slave driver, but of a middle manager filing his reports. These fragile documents reveal the hidden architecture behind the stone architecture, a bureaucracy of astonishing capability. They show a clear hierarchy, with inspectors reporting to superiors, who answered to the vizier, the king's right hand. They prove the existence of complex supply chains that stretched across the country, with resources allocated years in advance. Most importantly, they introduce us to the concept of daily accountability, where every block moved, every loaf baked, was noted and tallied. This level of administrative control reveals that the true foundation of these wonders was not just physical labor, but intellectual labor, the relentless, meticulous work of planning, forecasting, and solving a million small problems before they could become catastrophes. The scribe with his stylus was as essential as the mason with his chisel, for without the map of words, the mountain of stone could never be built. The meticulous records of Inspector Mura give us the plan, but they cannot tell us the feel of the rope in your hands or the sound of stone grinding on wood. For that, we must step out of the archive and into the field of experimental archaeology, our 12th clue. This is where theory meets muscle, where modern researchers roll up their sleeves and try to build like the ancients did, using only the tools and methods the evidence suggests. Projects like the Giza Plateau Mapping Project led by Mark Lehner or the famous Nova Pyramid Building Experiment are not just academic exercises, they are time machines made of sweat and dust. By gathering teams to quarry limestone with stone and copper tools, to shape a block with nothing but patience and abrasive sand, and to haul it on a replica wooden sledge across wet sand, these experiments transform abstract numbers into tangible reality. They answer questions no text can. How many people does it actually take to move a 2-ton block? How long does it truly take to dress a stone to a perfect surface? The data that emerges is humbling and illuminating. Researchers have found that a well-organized team of around 20 people can move a massive stone block at a reasonable walking pace using the sledge and wet sand method, confirming the feasibility of the tomb paintings. They have discovered that the supposedly primitive tools are remarkably effective, that a copper saw with sand slurry cuts through limestone not in days, but in hours of sustained work. Perhaps most importantly, these experiments often reveal the elegant simplicity hidden within ancient methods, solutions so logical they feel obvious once you are doing the work yourself. This living archaeology turns speculation into a physics problem with a clear answer, showing us not just what was possible, but how it might have felt, the rhythm of the work, the communication needed between team members, the problem-solving that happened in the moment. It proves that these wonders were built not by magic or alien intervention, but by human intelligence applied through persistent, coordinated effort. By trying to walk in their footsteps, we gain a profound respect for the skill embedded in every action, the accumulated knowledge of generations that turned a daunting engineering challenge into a repeatable, daily routine. But the coordinated effort of 1,000 hands is only as effective as the tool in each one. The 13th clue in our investigation is not a grand structure, but a humble collection of objects found scattered near quarry sites and workshops, the specialized toolkits of the ancient world. These are the intimate instruments of creation, copper chisels with their tips splayed from repeated blows, dolerite pounders worn smooth from grinding granite, wooden mallets, and finely knotted measuring cords. To an untrained eye, they might look like simple rocks and broken metal, but to an archaeologist, the wear patterns on each tool are a diary, recording thousands of hours of specific, skilled labor. A chisel used to cut soft limestone will wear differently than one used to score harder sandstone, telling us not just what they were building, but exactly how they were building it. This evidence reveals a society that did not just use tools, it perfected them through relentless iteration. We can trace a clear technological evolution across centuries, from the earliest stone hammers at Neolithic sites to the introduction of copper alloys in Egypt and Mesopotamia, and later to even harder bronze in other cultures. This was not random progress, it was direct adaptation driven by ambition. When a pharaoh demanded larger blocks of harder granite, the toolmakers had to innovate, experimenting with new metal blends and handle designs to meet the challenge. The construction site itself became a laboratory for material science. Excavations often revealed dedicated areas for tool maintenance, with grinding stones for sharpening edges and furnaces for repairing or recasting metal heads. This indicates a continuous cycle of use, wear, repair, and improvement happening right at the foot of the rising monument. It underscores a powerful feedback loop, where the dream of a massive project pushed the boundaries of available technology, and each small technological breakthrough, in turn, unlocked new architectural possibilities. The drive to build the impossible did not just consume tools, it invented them, forging better chisels, stronger saws, and more durable drills from the very need to shape a more ambitious world. In these worn and simple objects, we see the tangible spark of innovation, the proof that humanity's greatest leaps forward often begin with the need to solve a very hard problem, one careful strike at a time. Those worn tools only have meaning when held by a human hand, a hand that belonged to someone with a name and a crew. The 14th clue pulls back from the physics of stone to the sociology of the workforce, asking the fundamental question, who were the builders and why did they come? The evidence from tomb inscriptions to settlement patterns points not to a story of chains, but to a complex social contract, a system historians often refer to as corvée labor. This was a form of taxation, but paid not with grain or gold, but with time and muscle. For a period each year, particularly during the inundation season when the Nile's floodwaters made farming impossible, citizens would be called upon to contribute their labor to state projects. It was a civic duty, a shared investment in the kingdom's glory, and they believed in the cosmic order itself. The personal touch comes from the names they left behind. Inscribed on stones within the Great Pyramid and other monuments are the proud, often playful names of work crews. We find labels like the Friends of Khufu, the Drunkards of Menkora, or the Enduring Gang. These are not the grim markings of enslaved people, but the spirited badges of identity from organized teams, likely from specific towns or regions, who took collective pride in their contribution. They were competing for honor, not just following orders. This system of organized, rotational labor transformed a massive construction project into a nationwide endeavor. It mobilized a significant portion of the population, not as a burden, but as a unifying ritual. A farmer from a distant village would travel to Giza, work alongside men from other provinces on a crew with a memorable name, eat from the state-sponsored bakeries, and return home with stories of helping to build a mountain for the god king. This experience wove the reality of the central state's power into the lived experience of every citizen. The monument became a physical manifestation of a social agreement, where labor provided by the people reinforced the spiritual and political authority that, in turn, organized and protected the people. It was construction as community building, where the act of moving a stone together strengthened the invisible bonds of shared identity and purpose, making the pyramid not just a pharaoh's tomb, but a nation's project. The spirit of the work crews found its echo in the strength of their living partners. Human ingenuity and endurance were the heart of the operation, but the muscle was often multiplied by a different kind of force. Our 15th clue looks to the animals that shared the burden, whose silent contribution is etched into tomb art and buried in ancient trash heaps. Throughout Egyptian art, we see vivid scenes of oxen, powerful and steady, harnessed to the same wooden sledges used for the heaviest stones. These were not symbolic images, they were a record of daily logistics. The physical evidence supports this, as excavations of the worker settlements at Giza have uncovered enormous quantities of cattle bones, far more than would be expected for a small elite feast. This points to a systematic, large-scale provisioning of beef for the labor force, and it strongly implies that the oxen themselves were present, living assets that were fed, cared for, and put to work until they were no longer able. Their sheer mass and pulling power would have been indispensable for the initial movement of the largest monoliths from the quarry floor onto transport paths. For the constant, smaller-scale logistics that kept the city alive, another animal was essential. Donkeys, with their legendary stamina and ability to traverse difficult terrain, formed the backbone of the supply chain. Trains of these sturdy creatures would have moved the endless stream of materials that did not warrant a barge or a massive sledge: copper tools from distant mines, food from outlying farms, pottery, rope, and timber. This integration of animal power represents one of humanity's earliest and most profound technological leaps: the domestication of force itself. By selectively breeding and training oxen, donkeys, and later horses in other cultures, ancient societies effectively invented living engines. These animals did not tire in the same way as humans. They could work longer hours on simpler tasks, and their strength was consistent and reliable. This allowed human crews to be redeployed to more skilled, precision work, like fitting stones or carving reliefs, while the animals handled the brute force transport. It was a brilliant division of labor that expanded the physical limits of the entire project. The use of fauna was an early form of mechanization, a biological technology that turned grazing herds into a renewable source of kinetic energy, seamlessly woven into the grand machine of construction. The silent strength of animal power lifted the stones, but to place them, the builders had to ascend the rising monument themselves. Our 16th clue looks at the architecture that vanished, the ghostly framework that made the final assembly possible. To build high, you need to stand safely, and the evidence for this temporary world of wood and rope is often indirect but utterly compelling. Around the bases of many ancient structures, from Egyptian temples to Roman amphitheaters, archaeologists find patterns of post holes, small but deliberate sockets carved into the foundational stone. These are the footprints of vanished scaffolding, the anchor points for a wooden skeleton that once clung to the rising walls. In other places, we find the faint impressions of wooden beams left in the mortar of a wall, a perfect negative space where a support once rested and was later pulled away. Art provides another window, with tomb paintings and later Roman mosaics occasionally depicting workers balanced on multi-level wooden platforms, applying the final carvings to a statue or painting a ceiling high above. The most vivid testimony comes from Roman construction, where the brick putlog holes are still clearly visible in the sides of colossal structures like the Colosseum. These are square holes left by the horizontal timbers called putlogs that were built right into the wall as it rose. The masonry was laid around the ends of these logs, which supported the planks of the work platforms. When the wall was finished and the scaffolding dismantled, the timbers were pulled out, leaving these purposeful gaps as a permanent record of the construction process. This reveals a profound understanding of temporary load-bearing architecture. These wooden frameworks were not haphazard piles of lumber. They were engineered projects in themselves, requiring meticulous planning, quality materials, and an intimate knowledge of stress and stability. They had to support not just the weight of workers moving carefully, but also the immense weight of the next stone block being winched into position beside them. A failure in this temporary system would mean catastrophe, cascading down through the carefully laid courses below. So the scaffold was a calculated risk, a fleeting lattice of trust built against the sky. It demonstrates that the master builders thought in 4 dimensions, planning not just for the permanent monument, but for every temporary stage of its creation. The true wonder, then, is that these soaring testaments to permanence were built upon a foundation of carefully calculated impermanence, a wooden ghost that held up the stone dream until the dream could stand alone. The wooden scaffold was the silent partner in creation, but the finished monument was designed to speak. Our 17th clue listens closely to the stones themselves, discovering that some of the most profound messages were not carved, but coded into the very dimensions and acoustics of the structure. This is where engineering transcends into something more, where a building becomes an instrument, a calendar, and a philosophical statement all at once. Take the great Mayan pyramid of El Castillo at Chichén Itzá. To the eye, it is a majestic geometric staircase to the sky, but stand at the base of its grand staircase and clap your hands once. The echo that returns is not a dull reverberation. It is a distinct chirping sound that uncannily mimics the call of the sacred Quetzal bird, a creature deeply woven into Mayan cosmology as a symbol of divinity and the sky. This was not a happy accident of physics. Researchers believe the precise spacing and angle of the stone steps act as a sound diffractor, breaking the single clap into a cascading echo that filters and shapes the sound into that specific frequency. It was an intentional auditory signature, a way for the monument to literally sing with the voice of a god, transforming a human action into a sacred response. This acoustic layer reveals a mindset that saw construction as a multisensory experience, where sight, sound, and ritual were inseparable. A similar encoding is found in the silent language of proportions. While often debated by scholars, compelling evidence suggests that the master builders frequently incorporated profound mathematical ratios into their plans. The Great Pyramid's base perimeter, for instance, relates to its height in a ratio that yields a remarkably close approximation of the mathematical constant pi. The Parthenon in Greece is famously analyzed for its potential use of the golden ratio, a proportion found throughout nature and celebrated for its inherent aesthetic harmony. Whether these were deliberate choices or emergent properties of a sophisticated geometric system, the effect is the same. It suggests the builders were seeking to embed universal principles into their work. They were not just stacking stones to be tall, they were arranging space to reflect a perceived cosmic order, to create a microcosm of a harmonious universe. This dimensional symbolism turns architecture into a frozen philosophy. The act of construction, therefore, becomes an act of encoding. Every aligned corner, every calculated slope, every resonant stair was a line in a grand poem written in geometry and physics. It was a merging of disciplines we often keep separate today, where the scientist, the priest, and the artist were the same person, using the same set of tools to achieve a single goal, to build a bridge between the earthly and the divine, between human understanding and the perceived perfection of the cosmos. The monument was their ultimate interface. Even the most perfect plan must sometimes bend to reality. The 18th clue in our investigation is perhaps the most human of all, the evidence of failure and adaptation. For every flawless pyramid that reached the sky, there are stories written in cracked stone and altered angles, proving that these master builders were not magicians, but brilliant problem solvers. The most famous example stands at Dosha, the bent pyramid. Its lower section rises at a steep angle, but halfway up, the slope abruptly changes to a much gentler incline. This is not a design choice, it is a mid-construction correction, frozen in time for eternity. Archaeologists believe the original, steeper angle began to show signs of instability, perhaps with settling or cracking in the internal chambers. Faced with a potential catastrophe, the engineers did not stubbornly press on, they adapted. They recalculated, changed the angle for the remaining courses, and saved the structure. This pyramid is not a monument to a mistake, but to a successful on-the-fly innovation, a testament to a culture that valued the integrity of the project over rigid adherence to a blueprint. Across the ancient world, we find similar silent testimonies. At the base of some monuments, archaeologists uncover the compressed rubble and mud brick of a collapsed ramp, a sudden logistical disaster that halted work until a new, stronger design could be implemented. In quarries, we see partially cut blocks with deep, fatal cracks running through them, abandoned where they lay because the stone itself had a hidden flaw. These are not signs of incompetence, they are the necessary friction of ambition. Each failure forced a new solution. Each cracked block taught a lesson about the hidden stresses within the earth. This evidence utterly humanizes the process. It shows that the chief engineer, standing under the desert sun, had to make a terrifying decision to change the fundamental shape of a pharaoh's eternal tomb based on what the ground was telling him. It reveals a project management system that was dynamic, not static, capable of receiving feedback from the structure itself and responding with intelligence. The true mark of sophistication is not a perfect first draft, but the ability to learn, adapt, and persevere when the plan meets the unyielding resistance of the real world. In these bends and breaks, we see the living mind behind the monument, constantly observing, calculating, and daring to change course to ensure that the dream, against all odds, would still reach the sky. A cracked stone teaches adaptation, but a dry throat can halt an empire. The 19th clue shifts our focus from the stone to the element that made its manipulation possible, the silent, life-giving necessity of water on site. We have already seen how canals turned rivers into highways, but once those stone-laden barges docked at the project's base camp, a new and equally daunting challenge began, providing enough fresh water for the living, breathing city of builders and for the very act of construction itself. In the shadow of these desert monuments, archaeologists have uncovered the subtle infrastructure of survival, a network of deep wells, clever catchment basins, and the fragments of countless ceramic jars and skins. This was not a secondary concern, it was a parallel megaproject running beneath the main event. Think of the sheer scale of demand. Thousands of workers laboring under a relentless sun required a constant supply of drinking water to prevent collapse. The making of mortar, the essential glue for many structures, required vast quantities of water to mix with gypsum or lime. And we return to that brilliant trick of wetting the sand for sledges, a technique that would have consumed gallons with every major block moved. Perhaps most critically, water was the invisible partner in craftsmanship. The cutting and polishing of hard stone, from granite to basalt, relied on abrasive slurries, sand mixed with water that turned simple copper tools into effective grinding instruments. Without a steady stream of water, the saws would bind, the drill cores would overheat and shatter, and the final mirror-like polish would be impossible to achieve. Managing this resource in an arid environment reveals a logistical genius equal to moving the stones themselves. Engineers would have mapped the local water table, digging deep, stable wells that tapped into reliable aquifers. They likely built catchment systems to capture rare rainfall, channeling every precious drop into storage cisterns lined with waterproof plaster. The distribution then had to be managed, with teams assigned solely to the task of filling and transporting water jars to specific workstations, from the mortar mixers at the base to the polishing crews high on the scaffold. This creation of a clean, reliable municipal water supply for a temporary city of thousands mirrors the very problems faced by a modern urban planner. It required foresight, hydraulic engineering, and a rigid daily schedule. A single day without water would not just pause construction, it would threaten the health of the entire workforce and unravel years of planning. So this clue unveils the project's hidden circulatory system, a network of channels and jars that pumped the lifeblood of the operation to every corner of the site. The monument's endurance is therefore a testament not only to stone, but to the mastery of the most fluid and essential element of all. While water sustained the body, something else was needed to fortify the spirit for a decades-long endeavor. The 20th clue in our investigation is often found not in towering walls, but in the quiet darkness beneath them, in small, sealed pits deliberately dug before the first foundation stone was ever laid. Archaeologists call these foundation deposits, and they are among the most intimate windows into the ancient builder's mind. When excavating the corners of temples, under gateways, or at the base of obelisks, it is common to uncover carefully arranged caches of objects. These are not lost items or trash, they are deliberate offerings. A typical deposit might contain a set of miniature tools, perfect little copper chisels and stone pounders, symbolizing the work to come. Alongside them, you might find food offerings like the bones of a bull, ceramic jars that once held beer or wine, or even simple models of bread loaves, all meant to nourish the spirit of the place. Sometimes there are inscribed plaques bearing the name of the king who commissioned the work, permanently tying his identity to the sacred ground. These rituals, described in texts and confirmed by excavation, were the true groundbreaking ceremony. They served a profound dual purpose. On one level, they were an act of sanctification, a way to consecrate the site to the gods, to seek divine favor and protection for the monumental task ahead. It transformed a patch of earth from a mere construction zone into a sacred space, a bridge between the human and the divine. But on a deeply human level, these rituals served as powerful psychological management. For the thousands of workers who would spend their lives on this site, knowing that their labor was blessed, that they were participating in an act of cosmic significance, provided a motivation far stronger than any whip or command. It united architect, artisan, and laborer under a single, shared belief system. Their exhausting, repetitive work was not just moving rock, it was fulfilling a divine mandate, building a home for a god, or ensuring a king's journey to the stars. This spiritual framework provided the enduring why that made the impossible how tolerable. It fostered a collective identity and a sense of sacred duty that could be passed down through generations. The foundation deposit, therefore, was the first and most important piece of the project's non-physical infrastructure. It laid an invisible cornerstone of meaning, ensuring that every block placed thereafter was more than just weight and measure, it was an act of faith. This clue reveals that the most sophisticated management tool of the ancient world was not a ledger or a blueprint, but a shared story, a narrative of purpose so compelling it could inspire people to build mountains. A shared story could inspire the workforce, but it could not direct them in the moment. On a site that stretched for miles, with the deafening noise of stone on stone and the shouts of thousands, how did a single instruction travel from the chief architect's lips to the hands of a worker a quarter-mile away? Our 21st clue searches for the project's nervous system, the invisible network of communication that turned individual effort into synchronized action. While we rarely find ancient megaphones or instruction manuals, the sheer scale and precision of what they built demands that such a system existed, and we can reconstruct its likely form from necessity and subtle hints. In a world before electronic signals, communication had to be immediate, unambiguous, and capable of cutting through chaos. The most probable methods were a blend of the visual and the auditory. Foremen, positioned on high points of the rising structure or on temporary wooden towers, could have used simple flag signals or polished metal mirrors to flash coded messages across the site, a silent language of cloth and light. For broader alerts, the blast of a horn or the beat of a specific drum rhythm could signal a shift change, a meal break, or an emergency halt to all activity, its sound carrying over the din. There is also the intriguing possibility that the site's own acoustics were engineered to aid communication. The layout of worker barracks and open plazas might have been arranged to create natural sound channels, allowing a foreman's voice to carry farther to his specific crew. This layered approach, visual for precision, auditory for broad commands, created a robust network. This system was powered by the clear hierarchy we see in the administrative records. Instructions would flow down a chain of command, from the master architect to senior foreman, then to gang bosses, and finally to the individual work crews with their proud, identifying names. A command to begin hauling a new capstone, for instance, would trigger a cascade of prepared actions, each team knowing its role because they had practiced this sequence on 100 previous blocks. The foreman's signal was not a request, it was the catalyst that set a pre-arranged physical machine into motion. This invisible web of signals and chains of command was what transformed a bustling crowd into a single organism. It ensured that the pull on a rope in the quarry happened in perfect unison with the guide at the ramp's crest, that the release of a counterweight was timed to the second, and that 10,000 people could pivot from one task to the next as smoothly as a flock of birds changing direction. Without this instantaneous, reliable communication, the project would have dissolved into a cacophony of disconnected efforts. The true coordination, therefore, happened not in the stone, but in the air and in the understood social space between each person, a silent agreement to listen, watch, and move as one. That silent agreement to move as one was fueled by something far more tangible than faith. The 22nd clue in our investigation asks the most pragmatic question of all: how was it all paid for? The answer is not found in coins or gold, but in the trash heaps of the worker settlements, in the broken animal bones and the carbonized seeds left behind from meals eaten 4,500 years ago. This is the archaeology of the dinner plate, and it reveals an economic system of astonishing scale and sophistication. By meticulously sifting through these ancient middens, researchers can reconstruct the worker's diet with remarkable detail. They find the bones of cattle, sheep, and goats, evidence of a regular supply of meat. They find the remains of emmer wheat and barley, the staples for bread and beer. This was not a subsistence diet scavenged from the local desert. It was a state-issued ration, supplied in consistent, high-volume quantities. This system is known to historians as staple finance, a form of taxation where people paid their dues to the state not with money, but with the literal fruits of their labor, with bushels of grain, heads of cattle, and jars of beer from farms across the kingdom. The central government, through its vast network of granaries and warehouses, would collect, catalogue, and store this immense agricultural surplus. Then, with the precision of a modern supply chain, it would redistribute this wealth as physical energy to the construction site. The grain was baked into bread, the cattle were butchered for protein, and the barley was brewed into a nutritious, safe beverage. Every loaf, every stew, every jar of beer represented a conversion of agricultural surplus into human calories, and those calories were then expended as physical labor moving stone. The scale of this operation is what truly staggers the mind. To feed a workforce of thousands, day after day for decades, required a bureaucracy capable of forecasting harvests, managing storage against rot and pests, and orchestrating transport from every province to the plateau. It meant that a farmer in the distant delta, by contributing a portion of his harvest, was directly, if indirectly, helping to lift a block onto the 55th course of the pyramid. His grain was quite literally transformed into national monument. This clue reveals that the true foundation of these wonders was an economic revolution, a centralized system that could capture the diffuse energy of an entire nation's farmland and focus it like a lens onto a single point of ambition. The state's wealth was not hoarded in treasuries. It was invested directly into the muscles and morale of its people, turning food into architecture and sustenance into a skyward ascent. That economic machine transformed grain into stone, but what if the stone itself was not what it seemed? The 23rd clue in our investigation ventures into a realm of scientific controversy, where the very nature of the ancient builders' materials is called into question. It is a theory that challenges a fundamental assumption that every block in a pyramid was quarried from a solid bed of rock. Some researchers, examining stone from the Great Pyramid under powerful microscopes, have pointed to unusual features, tiny air bubbles, chemical compositions that vary from natural limestone, and the presence of what appear to be fragments of plant material or hair. Their interpretation is radical. They propose that at least some of these stones were not cut but cast like a form of ancient concrete, a geopolymer. In this view, the builders would have crushed softer limestone, mixed it with a binder like natron or lime, and poured the slurry into wooden molds on site, creating perfectly shaped blocks that cured in place. Proponents argue this could explain the incredible consistency of some blocks and the speed of construction, turning a logistical nightmare of hauling into a local manufacturing process. While this theory remains far from the academic mainstream and is vigorously debated, its value lies not in a definitive answer, but in the questions it forces us to ask. It prompts a fresh re-examination of those mysterious tool marks and the uncanny uniformity of certain courses. Whether the geopolymer theory is ultimately validated or not, it represents the vital, cutting edge of archaeological science, where new technologies like electron microscopes and molecular analysis allow us to interrogate the past with questions we never thought to ask before. This clue, perhaps more than any other, is a powerful reminder that our understanding of ancient technology is not a closed book, but a living field of discovery. It cautions us against becoming too comfortable in our explanations, for the deeper we look, the more we realize that the past may still hold astonishing secrets, waiting for the right question to reveal a truth we simply had not imagined. The most advanced secrets of the craft were not written down for anyone to find. They were passed from master to apprentice in a sacred chain of trust, a living library of hands and eyes. Our 24th clue examines this legacy of knowledge, a system built on two powerful pillars: widespread apprenticeship and deliberate secrecy. The evidence for this educational machine is subtle but pervasive. In the tombs of skilled artisans, we find proud titles that trace a career path, from apprentice to journeyman to master craftsman. These were not honorary labels, they were markers of a formal progression, a lifetime spent mastering the language of stone. In workshop areas near construction sites, archaeologists can sometimes see this training in action. They find practice pieces, stones with hesitant, uneven chisel marks alongside perfectly executed samples, suggesting novices worked beside experts, learning by doing, correcting their errors under a watchful eye. This created a deep, resilient pool of skilled labor, ensuring that the knowledge of how to dress a granite block or true a wall was not lost with a single generation. Yet at the same time, the highest tiers of knowledge were likely treated as a protected asset. The precise astronomical formulas for aligning a temple, the advanced chemistry for creating durable pigments or cement, the secret geometries, this core intellectual capital was probably guarded by a priestly or scribal class. This was not merely about power, it was about preservation. By controlling this specialized information, the elite ensured that the most profound principles of their civilization, the ones that connected architecture to the cosmos, would not be diluted or misapplied. This created a fascinating and effective tension: the how of construction, the muscle memory of tool use, the teamwork for moving loads was disseminated widely through hands-on training, creating a capable workforce. But the why and the deepest how, the sacred mathematics and celestial blueprints were concentrated, passed down through selective, often secretive, initiation. This dual system guaranteed both the physical manpower to execute a vision and the uninterrupted intellectual lineage to conceive it, generation after generation. The monument, therefore, stands as a testament not to a single brilliant mind, but to a sophisticated society that understood how to grow, protect, and perpetuate genius itself. The legacy of knowledge passed down through generations was a renewable resource, but the forests and quarries they relied upon were not. Our final, 25th clue is perhaps the most sobering, written not in stone or papyrus, but in the silent, altered landscapes left in the wake of these colossal projects. This is the archaeology of absence, the evidence of what was used up. Around the Salisbury Plain, where Stonehenge rises, pollen analysis reveals a stark change. The dense oak forests that once covered the area began to vanish around the time of the monument's construction. This wood was fuel for fires to heat stones for shaping, material for the massive sledges and rollers needed to move the bluestones, and lumber for the scaffolding and settlements of the builders. The land was literally stripped to build the circle. In Egypt, we see a similar story written in exhausted quarries. The beautiful white limestone beds at Chura, which gave the pyramids their gleaming skin, were eventually mined out. The same fate met the prized red granite quarries at Aswan, their most accessible veins of flawless stone completely depleted after centuries of extraction. Even the very soil tells a tale, with vast areas near construction sites showing evidence of topsoil removal, used for making the millions of mud bricks for ramps and worker cities, leaving the land scarred and less fertile. These are not incidental side effects. They are the direct archaeological signatures of consumption on an industrial scale. They prove that these societies were pushing against the absolute limits of their local environment, operating at the very edge of what their ecological carrying capacity could support for the duration of the project. This forces us to see their choices in a new, complex light. The drive for monumental glory often demanded a strategic trade-off, a decision to prioritize immediate, transcendent achievement over long-term environmental sustainability. A forest that took centuries to grow could be felled in a generation to serve a vision meant to last for eternity. This final clue does not diminish their achievement, but rather frames it within the real, physical cost of ambition. It shows us that the true scale of these wonders is measured not only in the height of the stones they raised, but in the depth of the footprints they left upon the earth. In the end, these silent, depleted landscapes offer the most human lesson of all, that every act of creation, no matter how magnificent, is also an act of transformation, leaving an enduring mark on the world long after the last builder has laid down his tools. 25 clues now lie before us, each a separate piece of a magnificent puzzle. A quarry here, a papyrus there, a worn tool, a silent harbor. But history is not a collection of isolated facts, it is a story of connections. The true revelation emerges not from any single discovery, but from the invisible threads that weave them all together. Individually, these clues are fascinating fragments, but when we step back, they assemble into a complete and coherent blueprint for ancient mega-project management. We see a seamless integration of disciplines we keep separate today. The geology of the quarry directly informed the physics of transport, which then dictated the precise engineering of the ramp. That ramp was built by a workforce sustained through sophisticated sociology and staple finance, their every move tracked by scribble administration, and their entire purpose ignited by a shared belief system anchored to the stars. This is the grand synthesis, The choice of stone was the first domino in a chain reaction of cause and effect that rippled through every layer of society. A king's decree for granite triggered a mining expedition to Aswan, which activated a fleet of barges on the Nile, which demanded the dredging of a canal, which required the baking of extra bread to feed the boatmen, which called for the collection of more grain from a distant farm. Every action, from the celestial to the culinary, was an interdependent component of a single grand machine. These were not merely construction sites, they were the world's first integrated complex systems. They operated with a holistic intelligence that understood the worker's meal, was as critical to the project's success as the angle of the pyramid slope. The monument that resulted was therefore more than an object. It was the physical output of an entire civilization operating at peak coherence, a perfect alignment of material, mind, and spirit focused on a single skyward point. The stone that endures is simply the final expression of a fleeting, beautiful moment when an entire society became one synchronized engine of creation. This grand synthesis reveals a profound truth about human ambition. From the choice of a single stone to the alignment with the cosmos, the 25 clues we have explored paint a vivid portrait of ingenuity, not magic. Early societies managed massive construction not through alien intervention or limitless slave power, but through brilliant adaptation, communal effort, and sophisticated organization. They faced the same laws of physics we do, the same limitations of the human body, the same scarcity of resources. Their genius was in turning these limitations into creative strength. They used water to defeat friction, sand to cut granite, and the stars themselves as a surveyor's guide. They transformed a national harvest into architectural energy and a shared belief into an unbreakable collective will. These monuments, therefore, are far more than tombs or temples. They are the ultimate resumes of ancient civilizations, physical testaments etched in stone to what humanity can achieve through collective will and cleverness. They are proof that when a society unites its knowledge, its labor, and its spirit toward a single horizon, it can perform miracles of endurance that echo across millennia. As we look at our own skyward ambitions today, our vast bridges and towering cities, it prompts a fascinating reflection. What clues will we leave behind? What ancient mysteries will future archaeologists uncover about our own society's greatest constructions, deciphering the silent language of our steel and concrete? The story of human achievement is an endless excavation. Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe to journey with us as we continue to unravel the secrets of our past, one discovery at a time.